Here we have the gimbal set up on its Hohem supplied tripod, and we've got the AI tracking module powered on but not locked on, so that we're now getting the screen showing the video preview, which comes direct from the 2 megapixel camera, the new 2 megapixel camera in the AI tracking module. On the M6 it was a 1 megapixel version and obviously didn't have video display tracking to a separate screen. It just used the camera for the tracking function. But on this new one we've also got tracking along with the video transmission, and we're on the first screen of the controller, which shows the video that is being received from the tracking module. Now bear in mind that the tracking module is a little bit higher than the lens on the camera, so depending on if you're doing selfie videos, the view that you see on the screen is just slightly different to the one that will be recorded on the camera, but it's still fantastic to actually enable you to frame your shots and make sure everything is operating correctly. The M7 AI tracking module itself clips onto the top of the camera clamp, phone clamp, in a similar way to how it works on the M6, but now you can see the little orange button on both sides, which need to be depressed to release the tracking module from the phone clamp. This makes it much more secure, and now when you actually touch the module you can't just take it off. It's still magnetically attached but physically clamped as well, which is much more secure than on the M6, where it was possible to knock the tracking module off if you weren't careful. Taking a close look at the display and the remote control module, you can see on the top above the OLED picture screen, you can see some of the settings shown. So we have a full battery on the main gimbal, Bluetooth being connected, AI tracking module currently not connected, the system's locked, so the controller is locked to the gimbal, and on the right side, the very last display, is the battery level indicator for the display and remote control itself, which in this case is full. And then below the screen you can see there's the 3 dots, which show that there are 3 screens available, 3 main control screens available that you can scroll through from left to right. And then below that you've got the multifunction joystick, the mode button to the right above the shutter release, and the zoom control lever. Now we use the gesture control to turn on the AI tracking module. So there's the tracking module on, and then as we look at the OLED screen now, we can see the AI tracking symbol illuminating in green to indicate that the tracking module is now connected and operational. And then similar to before, when we use our flat palm gesture, this will turn off the tracking module. And here we can see the tracking module is turned off, and the red light on the AI tracking symbol now is displayed, showing it's disconnected. Moving back to the screen, we'll see now if we scroll from right to left, we'll go to the first control screen, which shows on the 4 options. We have F, roller control, we have balance, we have the follow mode selected, and we have scenario. So we'll just go through these one at a time to have a look how they work. So the first thing we'll do now is tap the roller function button to select what function we are going to use the roller on the side of the gimbal to actually carry out. So we'll tap the roller function, and at the moment it's set to focus. Now obviously we don't want focus for this current operation, but you can select focus, tilt, roll, pan, and towards the bottom of the menu screen you've got CCT and RGB. So for this we'll select CCT, and you'll get the red tick. and then we'll go back to the previous screen. So now the roller function is set to CCT. So if we turn on the light unit, which you'll see the display turning to orange, the light unit is on, and then if we move the roller, we're now on the temperature setting adjustment, so we can go from 6.5 down to 2.7 in terms of color temperature. Okay, and then if we tap on the light control symbol here, temperature symbol, we'll bring up the main menu. Now if we tap on the 100% symbol, this is where now we can control the brightness of the LED light using the roller control, and it shows the percentage of brightness that we have selected, corresponding to the lamp there. So if we go back again, we can now do the same with RGB. If we touch RGB, we've turned the light to the preset RGB color, and again the roller control will dim the display. You can also adjust it with the plus and minus keys, but the roller function is very convenient. We'll go back again. And if we hit the gamut, you can see on there it's on 1% on the RGB. Tap that. Now we are in the color changing mode. So there's the various temperatures set on the showing on the display. Again, you can use the plus and minus or rotate the scroll wheel to change the color temperature. So that's a very useful function and very easy to do using the controls here. Now we'll turn off the LED light function on the controller. So now the light function's off, and we'll look at some of the other roller functions. So we'll tap the roller function button, and we'll move from the lighting to, for instance, the roll control setting. So now we're on the roll control setting. So now when we rotate the roller, as you can see, we can alter the roll. Now this isn't for balancing the gimbal, this is just for using for video effects that you might want to use. So we've moved the roll control there. So what happens now is when you move the gimbal, the other functions that you've set will continue to work, but the roll will stay in the fixed position you've just selected for sort of creating effects. And likewise, if we roll back now to the horizontal position and we select tilt, we can now manually use the roller control to set a tilt angle, and similarly to before, the tilt will remain, I'm in pan follow mode, so the tilt will remain locked at the angle we've set, but the other functions of the gimbal remain the same. And with the pan angle selected while we're using the gimbal, it will remain in that location that we've preset. So now we can just use the control wheel to rotate that back to more of a central position. And so that's how those three controls for tilt, roll and pan can be used, which are very useful for any sort of creative video effects you want to use whilst you're making your videos. The other button we have here on the top right is roller set. When we click on that, it gives you the option to select reverse, which just reverses the direction of travel relative to how you move the wheel here. So at the moment, when I rotate it clockwise, the phone is rotating in a clockwise direction. If I put it to reverse, it goes in an anti-clockwise direction. So it's just a little bit of fine-tuning depending on your preferences. I prefer it clockwise to clockwise, so that's where I'll leave this one. Back to the control screen menu. They've got the follow mode button. At the moment we're on pan follow. And then you can see we've got pan tilt, follow. You can select for obviously the full gimbal control. Depending on how you're moving it as normal. And then we have POV, where obviously the phone will follow the movement more closely of the gimbal. And we have custom, where you can literally select what axis you want to move. So you can just select roll, for instance, and you can see the roll will operate, but there is no pan or tilt. It's just the roll motion that operates as you move the gimbal handle. And likewise, you can select any of those axes, or all of them or none of them, depending on what you want to do. If you select the pan button only, you'll now see you can pan the phone, but there'll be no roll, no tilt. So again, another nice little refinement, another useful setting. This particular screen called Motor Balance is very interesting because it actually shows you that the load, if you like, in this case the phone mounted in the clamp, is actually mounted balanced correctly because all the green lights are centered. Now if I apply some torque to the camera, effectively mimicking an off-balance camera, you'll see what happens here. You'll suddenly see on the roll control it's showing a non-balanced device. And it's likewise if I try and apply torque on the tilt mode or on the pan mode, it's showing that the weight and the system is not completely centered. So on this motor balance screen you should always see that green line, which is the thin green line in the center of all the options of tilt, roll and pan, which indicates everything is balanced and operating correctly. The final button on this screen that we haven't yet looked at is scenario. We'll tap scenario. So the top left button is rotation. If we tap rotation, it now gives us the option to rotate the phone in the clamp effectively, counterclockwise or clockwise. Counterclockwise with no endpoint until you cancel the movement, and clockwise with no endpoint until you cancel the movement. So if we just tap counterclockwise 1, and we'll see the gimbal rotate counterclockwise the phone in the clamp. And then we can exit at any time. So we've exited there. We can do the similar thing with clockwise. So again here we'll get a clockwise rotation and we can exit that. We've seen that. And then if we go counterclockwise with no endpoint, and we can also adjust the speed, I should have said here. So you can see now we're getting counterclockwise with no endpoint. So it will keep rotating until you cancel the movement by pressing the exit option button. And the same thing will happen obviously with the clockwise no endpoint adjustment. You can select here whether you want tilt, deflect or not. I've got it turned off. I don't want it tilting. I want it to effectively be on pan follow, but you can select tilt, deflection, and then you can set and it will move. If you're holding the gimbal and you move in a way that it will tilt the phone, it will tilt, but at the moment I've got it set on pan follow effectively. So clicking the wide angle button does the same job as 4 clicks on the trigger that we just used. So here we go, I've clicked it. It's now moved to the wide angle position with the gimbal arms now clear of any wide angle lens on the phone. We touch the button again and it will return to your normal filming position. The bottom left button on the display is called Panorama. We touch that. It brings up the various panorama filming options. And so if we touch 3x3 for instance, it will say, do we want to start shooting? And it will move the phone into the appropriate position and operate the shutter to take the appropriate shots. So we've selected 3x3 and here it's moving, taking the photos, and it will complete the 9 photos required for this particular shot. And there we have it, the panorama shot finished. Now what happens in the Hohem Joy app is that will now stitch those 9 photos together to make the finished photo. A similar operation carries on when you select up 180 degrees, 360 degrees or a 720 degrees VR effect. It moves the phone in the appropriate position, takes the photos, and then the Hohem Joy app stitches the photos together to give you the appropriate finished result. The final button on this screen on the bottom right is time lapse. Touching that, you've got the time lapse, motion time lapse setting screen. At the moment you can change the length of time for the time lapse, and what you do is you move to the first position you want to make the time lapse video in, tap plus, it will then lock on position 1. You then move the camera to your final position that you wish to use, tap button plus, and then we can change the length of the time lapse on here. 3 minutes we've selected, and if we press start, it will now start making the time lapse. And it shows on the display obviously that this is underway. As it's moving the phone, completing the time lapse. So now we'll exit that one and it returns back to the normal setting. Now we'll scroll across from, this is the second screen in the series, we'll scroll to the last control screen, and this one gives you functions, controllable, joystick, A/B set, speed and more settings. So if we tap on joystick, you'll see here you can change the speed that the tilt or pan operate when you move the joystick. So at the moment we've got the tilt speed on 4. If you tap speed, you can move that all the way up to 10, and now the tilt speed is very fast, as you can see. 4 seems to be quite a good speed, so we'll bring that back to 4, which is my preference. And the same with pan. At the moment it's on 5 halfway. Again, at the moment that is the pan speed. If I select 10, you'll see now the difference, much faster pan speed. I'll go back to my favourite setting of 5. And the other function is you can select the joystick control motion. So if we look at the joystick control, look at the tilt function at the moment. When I pull down on the stick, it pulls the camera down, and when I push up on the stick, it puts the camera up. If I hit the button and turn it to counterclockwise, the opposite will happen. I pull the stick down, now we go up, push it forward, upwards, and it goes down. I prefer it in the clockwise mode, and the same with the pan. If we currently we move the button left, camera goes left, right for right. If I turn it to counterclockwise, the opposite happens. So again, you can customize this to your particular preferences. I prefer the clockwise setting on both. So the next button on the top right is the A to B setting screen, where we can set the endpoints A and B for the gimbal to automatically film between the 2 points at a speed that you can also preset. So we'll tap A to B settings, and the first thing we need to do is set position A. So you use the joystick to rotate your phone camera to the position you want, and then you tap set A and you'll get a ding. You heard the ding, and then you move the phone camera to the position you want for set B. We'll move it round to there, and you tap set B, and now it's there. Now we can actually first of all return to set A already, and there's a little button saying return to A, so we'll tap that, and the gimbal will rotate the phone to that set A. Now if we want to now make a video recording using that movement, we now want to go to position B, which we've preset. So if we tap the button that says motion B, the gimbal now sets the record and rotates the phone while recording towards the set B position where it will stop. So as you see, using the control functions on the screen makes A to B very simple. Whilst you can do exactly the same job using the A to B buttons, you need to remember the key press sequence and the function of each key, whereas on the screen it's all laid out clearly and much easier to use. The next button is on the bottom left, and it is the speed setting for tracking, if we look at that on the follow speed, at the moment we're set to medium. You can go slower or you can go faster. I think medium works very well, and is the setting I prefer. You can see here, if I select the slow setting for instance, when I'm moving the gimbal, the phone and the camera move relatively slowly. If we change that setting to fast, now you can see the difference. It now moves much more rapidly. I think the medium setting is actually very good, but it's nice that you can adjust for the various video scenario you are making and change that speed of following. The final button on this third screen at the bottom right is more settings, and if we touch that, you'll see on the top one is language. Now obviously you've got English and Chinese, so the majority of us, I suspect, listening to this video will be selecting English. Gimbal sound I've got set to on, but obviously you can turn off the ding, which was one of those complaints on the M6 where many people wanted to turn off the button key press sounds. On this one you can just do it by tapping the gimbal sound button and disable any gimbal sounds, and with the little ding gone forever if you don't want it. The next option on the more settings screen is motor strength. So if we click on motor strength, you can see here at the moment it's set to medium. What this does is actually control the amount of torque on the 3 gimbal motors. So if you had a very heavy load, for instance, you might find that the gimbal would be improved operation if you selected high, which gives the motors effectively more power. I'm using, under normal circumstances, a Galaxy S23 Ultra, which is one of the heavier phones, and I find it works perfectly well on the medium setting. It works perfectly well on the low setting and the high setting. So the default was medium, so I've left it there. But when you change the settings if you apply resistance to the gimbal motor, you can actually feel the difference in the strength that or the power that the motor is outputting. If you hold like the phone, for instance, to try and stop it rotating or tilting, you can feel the difference between low and high. But for me, with a 500 gram weight capacity, it would appear that even on the lowest setting you've got plenty of power for the heaviest phone, but I've left it on the default medium. The next option in more settings is the level calibration. If you tap that, you've got the option of manual calibration or auto. Now on manual, if you click manual, you can alter the tilt, the roll and the pan. Now you can see if I select tilt and using the plus or minus button here, you can alter the tilt function. You'll see the phone moving, and it shows you on the screen how far you've deviated off of the central position. And roll is the same. As I tap the plus button, you can see the phone rotating, and if it goes 3 degrees maximum one way and 3 degrees maximum the other, I've got it on the 0, which seems to work absolutely perfectly well. And likewise with the pan, you can set that to effectively centralize it on the gimbal. So at the moment it's on 0 now, and clearly you can move it relative to that central position by 3 degrees either way. I'll put it back to 0, which seems to work fine. So that's the manual adjustment. This is very good. So if you do an auto calibration and you're not quite happy with the position of your phone in the clamp, you can go into manual and adjust it up to 3 degrees either way. The other thing to bear in mind is that, of course, you can manually tweak the phone position in the clamp. So I normally set everything to 0 and then just check it against the horizon, and you can obviously just, even though it's well clamped in, there is a slight bit of movement, so you need to make sure it is square, physically square in the clamp, because on my experience, if you have all the settings at 0, that is absolutely spot on. But it's nice to have the adjustments available. The final option on this screen is AI settings. If we click on AI settings, you'll see they have the options of tilt tracking and disable gestures. Now tilt tracking, which at the moment I've got enacted and turned on, means that when you move relative to the tilt axis, the AI tracking will tilt the phone and keep locked on. If you disable that function, now as you see, the tilt action isn't operating, but the pan is. So if for any reason you wanted it to lock on in the pan mode only and not have the tilt, you can disable the tilt tracking function here. I'll turn it back on, and now you'll see as I move up and down, we've got the tilt function back on as well as the pan. So that's another little useful tweak. And again, you can disable gestures. If you didn't want the gesture to start or stop the AI tracking, you can select disable and the hand gestures won't work. So that brings us to the end of those settings menus. And now if we go right back through the menus to the third screen, and now you'll see we can scroll back to the second screen, which we've been through, and back to the AI tracking module preview screen. So there's a good look at all the functions and controls all available to you through the detachable OLED screen, which makes setting and operating this gimbal really, really easy.